But now we are we are now, like say, subcontracting, pushing over, transferring that responsibility of social welfare from governments to the private sector. And it means that rather than producing, inventing, creating, working hard to help finance our own development, we would have to sit back and wait for people to hand it to us. What will be the conditions? What will be the long-term effects on the psyche, on the self-respect, a sense of being a barbarian, as defined in those terms? And that, like I said, that's what I'm afraid of. And I must remember that the old Beaton says, taking your time is not laziness. Taking your time is not laziness. And to give up on that just for a quick short-term solution, because the government obviously seems to have given up on that. In the same way, putting all their hopes on this national advisory council to find a solution to crime. What they're doing, they're passing off the responsibility to the philanthropic sector.
So that I had Dave play at the beginning of the show tonight, the Prime Minister, he was then the leader of the opposition, I believe, former Prime Minister Arthur, spoke about her reckless use of the party's financing, and seemingly to think that it was her personal purse, that she could do
And,
whatever she likes with it.
and that is what led to her overthrow,
Correct.
to
And
take it down.
so when I read her comments about no rush to carry festa figures, and she also made another comment where she talked about costs related to benefits. In other words, don't talk to
Ah,
me about how much it costs. Look at the benefits. But you
but
you
but
have to
but
give an account. You have
but
to
for
give
the
an account, Glyne.
I read where she said it would be irresponsible of her to give
Yes,
about. But all you have to do, okay, might not yet have all the figures in, but you know what your costs have been. Tell us
yes.
how much you spent so far, how much you committed. You don't have to so far, and then give us periodic updates as more and more figures coming. But to shut down everything to say to you to be everything together, I am very watchful of that, because I remember we are still, as far as I know, still waiting to get up. And the same way that Carrie Fester 2025 is 15 is a pet project of hers. There was also a pet project called EduTech that we are yet to get a definitive position on the money spent to.
Bring it back down that we can see that figure. $60 million. Who is accounting to because this is, well, to be honest with you, Glenn, I no longer know if it's the taxpayers' money or if it's money that borrowed. I don't know.
$60 million for what?
You're talking about
I,
this
for
Scotland
the
district.
Scotland
Scotland
district,
District.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Dave had
Mm.
it up there a moment ago. I'm
You know,
not going
yeah.
to ask him
But
if he
you see,
60 million spent so far on Scotland district roads. Okay, no, listen. 60 million spent so far on Scotland district roads, and she's projecting 97.6 million on Carrie Festa 2025. Are you serious?
anyhow, she said they haven't spent that much yet.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
I
well,
remember, if I remember, one of the highlights of my experience in cabinet with the prime minister when she was a minister, that she always had to be called to be pulled back
something ain't
where
right. Well,
spending money is concerned. Take your
Mhm.
well,
time. Don't you'd spend 300 million when 30,000 would do. So there's this take to spend other people's money.
yes, yes, like it's your own kitty.
Uh,
But
Prime,
very quickly,
Prime Minister Arthur had to keep her in as tight a rein as possible. He did not always succeed, but he tried hard. So therefore, now that she is Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, but
oh, she had the body
haven't
to
haven't
be
helped us.
accountable to
Haven't helped
now.
us.
She
Mm.
could do whatever she likes. But
Ask me
But
to.
Victor,
Yes,
I
sir.
understand the intensity of your feeling. I am not
Mm.
as close to the area personally that you have, but I feel your passion and your pain. First of all, I do not believe in coincidences. You've probably heard me say that several times. Everything we talked about is all interconnected, all related.
yes,
And
yes, yes,
secondly,
yes.
I do not have any personal um, feelings against these philanthropists, investors, or whoever who want to come and invest or get into Barbados. I understand it because Barbados is a lovely place, and most people will
Oh,
want to come here.
it's
Right, I
beautiful.
understand that. But
Beautiful.
what you have to remember is that they can only do it if certain permissions are given.
Mm-hmm.
Remember what the Prime Minister wrote in that document, where she's listed a whole set of possible investment sites around Bridgetown and Barbados and other parts, where she said when you apply to the planning and development department, of which she's head as minister, you apply with a presumption of development. Therefore, my interpretation with the presumption that you will be okay. So you can get almost anything you want. So when you're talking about these bizarre, these weird, these unacceptable, these strange decisions, where Barbados and Barbados heritage
Are overlooked.
are overlooked and disadvantaged and destroyed and whatever, where where are the permissions coming from? On what grounds come and
Can
justify to
only
the
be coming
public
from one office.
why these decisions were made on what basis? I'm still trying not to use the term disappointing in connection with the Prime Minister. One of the most um, absolutely outrageous things that, to me, centers around the Prime Minister is her absolute refusal to really give account to
Yes,
Barbadians
yes.
for some of these major that's not found 5 minutes. She travels all over the world talking about reparations and climate change and resilience and protecting the environment, but she has not yet. I mean, whole tongue St. James, the developers all Bridgestone, even the Africa, the $220 million of land she gave to the African Bank, she has not yet found it within herself to come and humble herself and spend time to seek to justify any of these. There might be some very good, logical, rational reasons financial why these decisions were taken. But come and tell us so we can follow the narrative and force the logic and come to a conclusion. But have this authoritarian decision making coming out of that department with no accountability, it really, really is bad for Barbados. It's bad for our democracy. It's bad for our attitude towards the citizens and themselves. It really is at the root of a lot of dissatisfaction in Barbados. And when the Prime Minister comes back and feels fretful about certain things, she rants and she tries to chastise and berate people, makes it. I'm saying that the Prime Minister owes it to this country and her colleagues, her MPs who are impacted directly by these problems in the various constituencies have to find a way to let her come, her department, her technicians, her expert, and explain to the public why certain things have been done. So, because the other things that have to happen and are happening, and people will wonder also, what is the decision making process, and see if it can make sense and give any sense of satisfaction to the public of Barbados.
Peter, he will tell you.
Victor, you have brought a subject which has been at the back of my mind, and I'm glad you did it. It gives me a chance. What has happened over the years, and now it's happening at great rapidity over the last 8, 10 years. There are people who come from abroad, settle in Barbados, set up businesses in Barbados, do well in Barbados, become sort of also part of the Barbadian society in certain ways, but they then end up buying more and more of Barbados from Barbadians. And it's coming from Jamaica, Trinidad, to the rest of the Caribbean. And that money is consolidating itself into a clique. Like I just saw the other way one company has bought 50% of Armstrong Industries. A lot of the businesses are being swallowed up by persons with bigger, deeper, like how Marcia has taken out Goddard's and all
Taking
those.
care and BS and
Right,
T.
right. But let me tell you what is the problem. There's an historical, a sociological problem behind that. Many years ago, I forget what year it was, the French angered the British forever. The British have not forgiven them yet. When the French described the British as nothing but a nation of shopkeepers, right? It's an insult that has gone down through the ages. I often attribute that to the Barbadian businesses. All the big businesses, you have the Goddards, not so much the Goddard, because they have diversified and survived. They have the Costa Mannings and all the big names that we born and start calling forever. They refused, and some had to do even with the Bever Bridge. I remember from Prime Minister Adams and also including Mr. Arthur, were trying to convince them to some of those. They have the most gorgeous sites as real houses on the beach. And we're trying to get them to give that put equity into projects, create marinas. What is happening now for private investors from abroad was being attempted 30 years ago. So I'm saying, and more people are consolidating themselves and squeezing the Barbadian out. And it's getting progressively worse. And as time passes, it becomes more and more difficult to retrieve the situation because the costs are astronomical. I
But you
have
know,
no one last thing. I've come to the
yeah, go ahead.
conclusion. That I think in our new constitution, I think we have to have a provision where no non-Barbadian can buy land, can rent it, can lease it, but it should not be better. The land is finite; it does not get any better. And I think we have to start to take. I used to object to that concept 20, 30 years ago, even within the Caribbean. I think Trinidad used to have it in some other places. But no, I'm saying that Barbados, if we are to preserve the uniqueness of the Barbadian culture and personality and thinking of real life, because we are very easy to absorb other people's way of life, their habits, their behaviors. And when you do that, you diminish what is also your own. Unless you can become everybody's but ourselves. We have to take stock and wherever possible, take protective and defensive measures to preserve the Barbadian identity, the Barbadian patrimony, Barbadian heritage, Barbadian built
Barbadian
and
culture,
man-made culture.
everything.
Because
Yeah,
your culture is everything about your real life, everything in
yeah.
your way of life is your culture. But that to me is a fundamental responsibility that is on our shoulders now. Victor,
Yes, sir.
um, as you mentioned that I started recall certain admonitions, certain things that the prime minister would from time to say when we talk about the cliques and whatnot. And he used to talk about afraid of not having a veranda government when certain members of cabinet will often bring certain topics or names or certain issues. He would say, I do not conduct a veranda government. My government is not dictated by what is what is discussed and decided at catwalks and verandas, at lunches on the weekend.
Mhm.
And that, even from those days, there were cliques forming who sought to exert undue influence on the decision-making um, processes in Barbados government. He had to stamp it out and stand there and work against it, against people who were who seemed to be susceptible to being manipulated or influenced by these kind of forces.
Well,
So it seems as though we're living it all over again.
Let me inject here quickly, Glyne. That is why I really commend you on the topic you you mobilized tonight, because there's control. The control now that we are seeing in Barbados is because of that foundation. Decisions made for Barbados are made in cattle wash. Continue.
So, now, if I were still a practicing journalist, I myself would carry out a campaign where I would either myself or my reporters would not attend certain press conferences, certain press until the prime minister sits down or and sort of sit down and give account to Barbados on certain specific topics. I would just do it. I tell you so because when I was a practicing journalist, I was based at the airport at one time. And that was my beat. And I used to interview Prime Minister Barrow. And not he was a premier Barrow Prime Minister too, in and out. And I remember once he went to was just before independence, when we had this controversy between and the 40s and the BLP and the DLP, independence alone as against independence with the federation, right? And he went to Brazil and came back on an official visit. I came back, and I of course went to interview him at the airport. And I said, Prime Minister, what would you say is the major outcome of your visit to Brazil? He said, well, I told the people in Brazil that China had, in that time, China was having a cultural revolution. China has the gang of four or something, and Barbara's got the gang of six, Henry Ford and Erskine Sanders. I Prime Minister, are you sure? He said, yes. He said, do you want me to believe that is all you can report to the public of Barbados about it? I said, yes. I said, but there has to be more. He said, no, my job is not to make news for you or the Advocate newspaper. I said, thank you, sir. Thank you. I did not interview him for 2 months. Every time I said, hello, sir, and I walked past him because I thought he was being disrespectful until he sent an emissary to call, he used to call me little man, bring that young man to me. We talked, and then I told him why. He said, okay, now I understand. So I'm saying there are certain pressures you can call. They need you just as much. They need the press as just as the press needs them. But you have to have standards,
You have to have
respect, and protocols, mutual respect to have, and that's what the press and Barbados fail do for the last 7 years with this guy, but have not have. But that I deal with the straight press and tell you why. Maybe next time I'll talk about that. Give you an indication of why we have the kind of press that we do.
Yeah.
What we are long overdue for it is that to have a real decent old time press conference where
yes.
where we decide on the topics and the press come and ask the question.
Which press?
Not a press.
Which
Not a
press?
press.
Which press you talking about? I'm
Not
sorry, with all respect,
the real press.
with all respect to our press, we need a Ricky Singh kind of reporter.
No, we got a David
A
Ellis and
Glyne.
people sit.
Yeah, David. I listened to David today too. But David, anyhow, don't let me say anything with David because David is a buddy of mine. Don't want to take off my head on brass tacks. The David Ellis and the Glyne Murrays. You think they would accept you in press corps?
I doubt. I doubt. But let me tell
You
you something.
know,
The point I was making, the Prime Minister came into office in 2018. And since then, she had one sit down interview. What was the election in July 2018? About 3 months or so after she became Prime Minister with David Ellis. One. You see the kind of interview she had with Armand Porno. She had one in Barbados in 7 years with the Barbadian jury. We sit down and ask probing questions. And I remember it well because on 2 or 3 occasions when Mr. Ellis was pressing her on certain issues, she said, no, man, you practice on one-upmanship and one-upmanship. And that one-upmanship is where you don't want anybody to get on top of you or feel that they're superior or they're winning against. So she got very offended when he pressed her. And I remember that well because that was characteristic of her persona. So I'm saying they need to do that. Otherwise, we are wasting time. And like next time or next Monday, I'll talk about put the current behavior or lack thereof of the modern press environment into context because there are certain issues that started, I think, in 1999 that we are seeing the manifestation of it today, and that you would understand a lot of things better.
I think